Briefly. No, I can't. Because as long as there have been deaf people, they have found a way to communicate. And in this country, we had no formalized education for the deaf. And so people would just use whatever gestures they could, like within their families and stuff. There weren't schools, so there wasn't an opportunity for a lot of deaf people like to get together and to share a language. And it wasn't until the 1800s that we sent a man over to France to learn how to educate the deaf. And he brought back with him a Frenchman, and they worked on developing the American Sign Language, because up until that point, there wasn't a formalized sign language.
One sec.
So can you briefly explain the origins of Spanish?
Well, they're Latin based, so they're based off a lot of the grammar and definitely the words are from their Romance language. So they're part of they come from the Latin family.
Okay. And then, like, how does the language itself change around the world? Like,
Well, languages are always changing.
Yeah.
So, and because there are so many different countries that speak Spanish, they have influences from all over. So the words are going to be changing based on, countries that they're closest to, because they have that nearness.
yeah.
So.
Can you briefly explain the origins of French?
French is a Romance language that comes from Latin, and a Frank language. There are these people called the Franks, and when they invaded that territory, which is now France, the people who were living there were people who were living during the Roman Empire. And so then you took the mixture of Latin and the Frank language, and it became French.
Okay, and can you explain the cultural differences and similarities between countries that speak French?
Well, French is spoken on all continents. It's a world language. France is a European country, obviously, but it had colonies in Africa. So French is spoken in most of the west part of Africa, and obviously those cultures are different from a European culture.
Okay, and then are there other countries that speak Japanese?
Yeah, not as a national language, but actually Brazil has a 4% Japanese population, so they have the biggest population apart from Japan that speaks Japanese. Apart from that, the United States, we have some Japanese speakers here, and I know the Japanese culture is especially popular in European countries, like Germany. They have huge anime conventions, but Brazil is the second most populated in terms of Japanese speakers.
Can you explain the cultural differences and similarities between people that speak Japanese around the world?
I think that people in Brazil, the Brazilian culture is very different from Japanese culture. So, I mean, the language does definitely adapt, especially in terms of like slang. So Japanese speakers here, we kind of speak a different kind of slang. And we have little cultish words. So like for places and cities, we'll shorten it. And so there's some words that we'll use in Washington even that other Japanese speakers won't know of. And there's Japanese that only Japanese exchange students use at UW because they kind of end up creating their own words in a way. So that's the way that I think that it's the most different. But people who are in Brazil and America, I think they aren't as conforming in their language use. I think they try to be more individualistic because of the culture differences there. And they're influenced by the Brazilian